Hey everyone! I recently got back into Japanese immersion and thought I'd post an update video since it's been quite a while since my previous ones. If you haven't watched them, I'll give a quick summary about what I've done so far. So in early 2023, I booked a Japan trip in September. I wanted to be at least a bit more familiar with the language before going, so I could kind of understand some of the things that I would hear or read while there. I started with hiragana and katakana like most people, as well as trying out the Genki books. Although I stopped the Genki books pretty quickly since they were sending me to sleep. Around a week or so later, I discovered acquiring Japanese through immersion, and this kind of gave me some sort of guidance about how I wanted to go about doing things. I downloaded Anki as well as the core 2K 6K deck and started working on that for the first month and a half, as well as watching YouTube videos and streams to kind of get used to listening before I actually started immersing. At around the 1.5 month mark, I had about 1,000 words in Anki, and I decided to try out immersing with anime. I felt like this was a good point to start at, and it wasn't really that hard to get into. After around a month of watching anime, I also began reading. I started with an easy visual novel and eventually moved on to a light novel after around 60 hours. In retrospect, it was definitely too early for me to start reading with these, and I feel like I would have made more progress using manga. But at the time I found the word lookups really tedious and I didn't find a better method for it until later on. After around 120 hours of light novels and visual novels, I started reading manga, which was a lot more enjoyable at the level I was at. In the 2 months leading up to my trip to Japan, I did around 150 hours of reading manga, as well as 100 hours of listening using anime, YouTube and streams. Ironically, I had to stop my immersion at this point since my Japan trip was coming up soon. It was a great trip, but overall I wasn't really at a level where what I knew was really useful. I could read maybe some signs or menus and hear if I needed a bag from the convenience store, and that was about it, to be honest. I was in Japan for the entirety of September, and after returning I didn't really have any intentions of immersing again. I felt like I'd kind of already reached my goal with Japanese, although in early 2024 I had the urge to kind of get back into things as I had a lot more free time after the holidays. In late February, I decided to try immersing again, even if it was just for an hour or so a day. Although I was quite discouraged at the start since I felt like I had lost a lot of my progress from the 6 or 7 month break I took. Shortly after starting again, I definitely realised what was wrong about this, and I'm pretty glad that I started up again actually. So I'll quickly talk about what I've been doing for the past 2 months since starting my Japanese immersion again. Because I already knew how to get started and where to get all the resources I needed from, the process for starting again was actually pretty smooth. I'll also include links in the description to any resources I mentioned throughout the video. The first thing I did was open the TheMoeWay resource list, as in my opinion this is probably the single best resource for anyone who's looking to immerse. I installed Anki again and downloaded the improved core 2.3K deck. I definitely prefer this over the core 2K 6K deck as it removes a lot of the irrelevant words for me personally. I also installed Yomitan and got all the dictionary set up for it. As I knew that I'd be reading manga again, I downloaded Mokuro to get ready for it. It's an OCR for manga, which makes it easy to do word lookups instantly in the browser, just like you would when browsing the internet or reading a novel. For Anki, I took a pretty similar approach as I did before. The only thing I really did for the first week or so was going through the core deck. Honestly, I was kind of surprised by how much was actually still ingrained in my brain after about half a year of not doing anything. I started with 100 cards per day for the first week until I kind of hit a point where I wasn't really as familiar with the new cards. I then reduced it down to 50 and eventually down to 20 until I finished the deck around a week ago. I felt like this was a pretty nice pace to go at, and it only took me about 30 minutes per day to finish. After around 700 or 800 cards studied, I started with some easy immersion like dramas or manga, and it kind of gave me the opportunity to start sentence mining again. I wasn't really taking it too serious at the start, and I was only doing around 2 to 5 cards per day until I was kind of more comfortable with the whole process again. But once I started immersing a lot more, I was able to mine 10 cards per day. I'm currently only at 700 cards since all of my decks from before got deleted from my old PC. A few days ago I finished the core deck, and I've already increased my new cards per day to 15 on my sentence mining deck. I would eventually like to push this up to 20 per day, but at the moment I'm fine with 15. With both the decks combined, I have around 2.7k cards, although this doesn't really mean that much, and I definitely know more words than that, but they're so common that I don't really need a card for them. So reading has been a pretty huge part of my immersion for the past 2 months. Honestly, it wasn't as hard to get back into as I thought it would be, and I've just been enjoying it so much. I remember using LearnNatively before for manga and novel recommendations. It has an approximate difficulty rating, so I figured this would be a good place to start at. If you're interested in the site, I'll leave a link in the description, as well as my own account if you're looking for some easier recommendations. I have a pretty bad habit of reading content above my comprehension, so I kind of try to avoid it as much as possible this time. I started reading with AJATT. It's a pretty simple manga and the story isn't too hard to follow, although it's definitely still above my comprehension at the time, but not too bad overall. I'd definitely recommend it if you're looking for a shonen or just something that isn't slice of life. Honestly, I was kind of mostly reading manga that I'd probably enjoy in English, as I found this was the most engaging for me. But after around 70 or 80 hours of that, I found Kimi ga Shinu Made Koi o Shite. It's just a simple Yuri love story in a fantasy school setting, but honestly it's kind of changed what I thought I wanted to read. I realised that as long as the story is actually kind of decent, I don't really mind reading slice of life, romance, Yuri, etc. Some of the other manga that I read that I would recommend are Bloom Into You, Blue Box, The Summer You Were There, and the first couple volumes of Boys Abyss was pretty good. After around 200 hours of reading manga, I felt like I really wanted to try reading a light novel, as I kind of wanted to see what my reading speed was at compared to before. I went for The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. It's a really short story and used a surprisingly low amount of kanji, even with more common words. I actually kind of found this harder since sometimes I struggle to remember vocab if it's written in hiragana or katakana. Story isn't really anything too special and the difficulty is pretty consistent all the way throughout. Although towards the end of the book, I kind of struggled with one section that had more sci-fi related vocab, but overall it was a pretty easy read. I was actually reading at 4,000 characters per hour, which was more than double what I was doing previously. Honestly, this was kind of a big confidence boost and it made me kind of want to read more light novels. So I didn't really know where to get them, so I found a free novel online called Hiyori-chan no Onagai wa Zettai. It was an okay read and not really too hard until towards the end of the book there was more war, news and political vocab that I definitely wasn't interested in, so I stopped reading after the first volume. It was at this point that I found the TheMoeWay eBook collection and it was exactly what I was looking for. It had every book that I wanted to read but couldn't find it elsewhere, and it's really put me in a great spot because I basically had infinite books to read now. If you're into reading novels or want to get started, I'd definitely suggest looking into it. And once again, I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. After this, I continued to read light novels as I felt like I was just starting to make a lot of progress with them, and I really wanted to carry on with that momentum. I did want to try reading something kind of familiar but also had a different theme to it, like fantasy or supernatural, so I started Whisker Away. I had watched the movie years ago but wasn't really paying attention to it and couldn't really remember anything apart from the main plotline. When I first started, for around 20,000 characters, I did sometimes struggle with fully understanding what the setting was, how many characters were in the scene and who was talking and stuff like that, but it got easier over time. I was actually close to dropping it at one point and trying something a little easier, as I thought it could just be too far with my comprehension level at the time. But then the next day it's like something clicked and suddenly I felt a lot more comfortable reading it. I'm really happy that I actually finished it, as it was a pretty enjoyable read, even if at some points it was kind of slow. After finishing it, I did rewatch the movie just to see if I'd missed any big events or if the settings were how I imagined. And for the most part, I didn't really miss anything, apart from there were a couple of characters that I didn't even know existed, but they were only in it for a few minutes, so I'm okay with that. It did kind of make me want to push for something a little more challenging in the future, but I ended up reading a short novel afterwards, which was decent for the first half, but then I totally lost interest after that and kind of just wanted to get over with as soon as possible. I have noticed that if I get bored of a plot point in anime or manga, I don't really mind as much because it comes and goes pretty quickly, but with novels, even the smallest thing seems to drag on forever, which does make me pretty reluctant to keep reading. Maybe I should just drop the book if it gets to that point, but I do kind of like finishing anything that I start. At this time, I felt like I was ready for something a bit out of my comfort zone. I didn't want to suddenly leap way ahead of my current level though, and start something like the Monogatari series, but I did want it to be somewhat different to what I usually would read. I ended up going for Kagami no Kojo. It's definitely the longest novel I've read so far, with 250,000 characters, so I knew it would take me a week or two to get through at my current reading speed, but it hasn't really been that bad actually. I'm currently only halfway through, but I feel like I've already learnt so much whilst reading it. It's not as if it's that much different in terms of vocab or grammar, but the quantity of words definitely feels higher. In other books that I've read so far, it kind of felt like the vocab was being reused after a certain point, and I would kind of just get comfortable reading it, but I haven't really felt like that so far. I'm still able to constantly add 15 to 20 new cards a day, and I do see a lot of the less common vocab cards that I have added from previous books or manga. Honestly, this has helped so much with really cementing the words in my memory, and vocab that I struggled with just a week ago have already become a lot easier to remember and recognise while immersing, so I can definitely feel the benefits so far. That being said, although it has helped a great amount, I also have struggled quite a bit too. Sometimes I just can't really figure out what the writer is trying to say, even if I know all the words in the sentence. I'm guessing this is a grammar thing, and with time it will become a lot easier, but it's still kind of frustrating for now, as I feel like I should understand it. That's pretty much all I've done for reading so far. I'm really happy with the progress I've made though in the past 2 months. Before really getting into novels, I thought reading only manga would be enough for me, but I've definitely changed my mind about this. I feel like you miss out on so many words by restricting the content you read, so having a good mix is really beneficial actually. So I really struggled with finding motivation to do more listening these past couple of months. I did initially start watching anime with Japanese subtitles, but I kind of figured that if I'm going to be trying to do listening practice, I may as well just make it full listening instead of getting half reading, half listening. I definitely feel like this was the way to go, because although at the very beginning it was really rough, I think I had around 5% comprehension at max per anime episode, and it steadily improved over time. I think I'm around 20 or 30% right now, depending on what I watch, which is still quite bad, but honestly I'm happy with where it's at, considering the low amount of hours I've put into it. Over the next few months, I'm probably going to try and aim for at least 1 hour per day, but honestly I do kind of struggle with finding content that I'm actually interested in, as my comprehension is so low compared to my reading, and there's only so many hours that I can watch anime girls do something funny without really knowing what they're actually saying. Around a week ago, I did randomly stumble across a new Pokemon series, and after giving it a go, I kind of found it pretty comprehensible since it's aimed at children, so I'm sticking with it for now. I've only watched 8 episodes at the moment, but it should give me something to listen to for the next 20 or 30 hours, which is pretty nice. I'll quickly go over some of my current stats. So for my immersion hours pre-Japan, it was 116 hours of Anki, 104 hours of listening, and 273 hours of reading, with 51 volumes of manga and 1 light novel read. In total, it's 494 hours, and I'm going to keep these separate from my immersion from now on out. So for my current immersion hours in the past 2 months, it's 40 hours of Anki, 33 hours of listening, with 2 series and 12 movies watched, and 306 hours of reading, with 121 volumes of manga and 7 light novels read. In total, it's 380 hours, and that averages out to 5 hours and 30 minutes of daily immersion, or 6 hours and 10 minutes including Anki. Although it's less hours than before my Japan trip, I'm really happy with where I'm at currently. I feel like I've made a huge amount of progress, and long term these hours are kind of manageable for me without burning out. So for my future plans, there isn't really too much difference from what I've been doing so far. Ideally, I would like to increase my daily listening immersion and kind of cut down on my reading, unless there's a way for me to squeeze in more hours without changing anything, but I'm not really going to force it. Something that I'm definitely interested in, but probably won't be too strict at in the beginning, is the monolingual transition. I think by the 9-month mark I'll probably have at least implemented it in some way, But if I'm reading and there's something I really want to quickly look up using the English dictionary, I won't be too strict about it. Like I said earlier in the video, I would like to increase my daily mind cards to 20. This is really manageable when reading light novels, especially when you first start a new one. Although, if there's some days that I can't hit 20, I'm not going to be too worried about it, to be honest. Anki is definitely helpful and I'll continue doing it, but I'm not really trying to chase a certain amount of cards like I was prior to my Japan trip. I do plan on almost entirely reading light novels for the next few months. I am glad that I put so much time into manga, since it's a lot easier to start immersing with for reading. But depending on what I'm reading, the density of words is a lot lower for manga compared to light novels. For example, I'm pretty sure A Whisker Away has more characters in it than all 9 volumes of Inside Mari. There's not really much else that I plan on doing apart from just immersing more. I'll make another video for the 9-month mark probably. And this time, thankfully, I won't need to stop because I'm not going to Japan again anytime soon. If you made it this far in the video, then thanks for watching. Hopefully this helped give some motivation to at least one person, as I personally love watching these kind of videos from other people. If you're looking for more content like this, I'll put on the screen some channels that I've really enjoyed watching over the past couple of months. And yeah, that's it for this video. See you in 3 months.